you have a far greater chance of success with a franchise as a new business than you would with a standalone business, in part because you have that playbook. You have somebody standing behind you who helps you understand how to do this. And then the thing that I love probably most about franchising is you work with a community of owners, other people who have invested like you in the same brand. Those people have the same operational issues, the same operational opportunities that you do every day. I believe in the service that we provide, even though it's free to the candidate. On the other end of the process, if a candidate does buy a franchise, the franchisor pays us a fee. So what is the franchisor paying for? They're paying for us bringing quality candidates to them who have already been screened and know what to expect in the process when they meet with a franchisor.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Reframe First. I'm Oleksij, the host of the podcast, and let me welcome our today's guest, Russ Merbeth, founder and CEO at Bandera Advisors, and also member of FranChoice network of consultants. So, hey Russ, it's great having you here.
Hi, Oleksij. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, before this podcast, you told me an interesting story how you got into the franchising and how you started working with FranChoice, but you also owned a network of fitness clubs.
Yes.
You were also a franchisee, and could you tell us the story, and we will start from there.
Sure, of course, happy to. So I was a lawyer and a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for 30 plus years. And when I was ready for that career to be over, transition to something else, I could have retired, but instead I wanted to continue to be engaged and economically productive. And I started talking to folks about the businesses they were doing, and friends of mine have a franchise, and I started looking at franchises. And I was actually connected to Alloy Personal Training, the franchise that I'm an owner in, by a FranChoice consultant. And then over time, that consultant actually said, hey, why don't you join us as a consultant at FranChoice? So I am presently an owner of 2 Alloy Personal Training locations here in the United States. They're both essentially in the Washington, D.C. region. And then I'm actually full-time now doing consulting as a franchise consultant through my Bandera Advisors entity. So what I work with, and this is what we do at FranChoice, we work with candidates, people who are perhaps in career transition, want to leave government service, military service, the private sector, looking for something to do that's not like what they've been doing, to find occupation that's more than an occupation, it's more than a job. They want to own something and be in charge of their day-to-day schedule. They want to be responsible for something personally as opposed to working for someone else. So we work with more than 250 brands and help people figure out. We're sort of a matchmaking service. It's free to the candidates. We try to match them with a franchise opportunity that makes sense based on their personal interests, their business history, things they're intrigued by. And then we also try to make sure that they consider options that they might not have, just because there can be all sorts of great businesses that you could get into that you'd never think of.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard there are like certain sectors in franchise industry which people do not even think about, like senior care, like home services. Because like when thinking about franchise, most people think about food, restaurants, and so on and so on. So being like first time franchisee, and I've heard there are like a lot of IT, past IT workers that are stepping into the industry because of all these layoffs and stuff. So, being a first-time franchisee, how do you make a right choice? How do you choose the right franchise for
Sure.
me?
Yeah. In fact, I work with a number of candidates right now. I'm working with them on finding something to do because they're being laid off, they're being downsized, and I again, largely the candidate pool that I work with are people in career transition. Um, Finding the right fit in a franchise is sort of a multi-step, multi-layered process because first you want to think about, well, what do I like doing? What are the things that what are businesses that I patronize that I really like? And then you want to think about your schedule. What kind of a schedule do I want to have as a business owner? Do I want to be day to day, 12 hours a day? Do I want to be involved 4 or 5 hours a week? Very different concepts there or structures. Um, and then you want to consider the kinds of things that you might actually be happy doing. Is there a brand that I would be pleased to be, put that name on my business card and say, I own this business and provide this particular service. Most franchises in one way or another are in the service business. You don't find a lot of product franchises. Somebody's making a product, that's what their business is. They make that product. They don't need franchisees to do it. But food service is one area that we work with a good bit because it's common. People understand that as a franchise opportunity. But we also do, as you mentioned, a lot with senior care, a lot with home services. There are, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of homes in the United States, but every one of them needs something done to it fairly regularly, whether it's cleaning out the gutters or plumbing. And for just about every aspect of your home and the kinds of repairs that you might need to do, there's a business that takes care of those. And a lot of those are franchises. So, we work with clients who say, I don't want a brick and mortar. I don't want to have to lease a physical space and do a build out. I don't want to be tied to that location. Well, those people are naturals for businesses they can run from their home. Maybe they have teams that they're deploying. Maybe they have vans or trucks. But then there are people who say, I absolutely want to have a physical location where I go to every day, or at least regularly, and be in a service business that is identified with a location. So all of those things, it depends on your financial capability. How much money do you have to invest? How much might you be able to borrow if you're going to do an expensive build out? Um, and again, how do I want to spend my days? That's one of the first questions. How do you like spending your day? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So that's all part of the process of trying to figure out with someone, are they right for this kind of franchise or for this kind of franchise? And we work with, as I said, more than 250 brands. And the buy-in level to get started, your initial investment can be anywhere from 100 to 200,000, or it might be 1.5 million. It really depends. It's a wide range, and it depends on what you want to do and what you're capable of.
Yeah, yeah. I was about to ask about about the costs of owning a franchise. So from 100 to 200 and up to 1 million. How about capitalization, undercapitalization? How predictable is it? How predictable are these promised earnings on a franchise? From what I know, you cannot promise anything unless it's written in FDD. But still, how predictable are they? And besides that, besides the franchise fee and some setup fee, there is also some ramp up period probably. How do you account for all of that, and how do you advise your clients that, okay, you got 500,000, you should probably go that way? so,
Yeah.
how does it work?
Again, the primary consideration initially is what sort of business does somebody see themselves doing? And so we explore, all the different types of businesses there are, what kind of hours you need to spend, how many people you might need to hire. Um, and depending on what they want to do, depending on how they see their life going, um, we look at then, okay, if somebody really wants to be in a brick and mortar, can they afford the initial buy-in, which could be much higher? I mean, the initial investment. With every franchise, you're going to pay a certain amount upfront to the franchisor. That's just an initial fee. It's an upfront fee. That's part of your investment range.
You're
Um,
buying the system. Yeah. The
it,
system and the play. Yeah.
right. They have expenses. They have to market. They have to do sales. They have operational expenses, and that initial fee goes to help them defray those expenses. But beyond that, um, the deployment of capital could be on construction costs, on hiring a construction firm, on paying for the build out. Or it might be if you're doing a service brand where you're operating it from home, maybe you need 3 or 4 service vans, and those need to be outfitted and they need to have the branding put on them, things like that. So obviously a much lower initial investment, which in turn theoretically means that your ability to recoup your initial investment is going to be much quicker than on a brick and mortar where you're taking on debt, you're working with lenders to capitalize your build out, maybe give you some operating capital for your first year, those sorts of expenses. And in that case, it could take longer to recoup your initial investment. But there are so many different factors. I will say this: one of the big differences between buying a franchise, going into a franchise system versus starting your own business is you're working with a playbook. You're working with people who already have a proof of concept in the market. So there's a track record. Many of the brands that we work with are established. They have between, say, 20 and 50 locations already open. And they have plans to have so many open each year for the next 5 years, say. And then the franchise disclosure document that you mentioned, the FDD, that will provide financials by the unit. So you're able to see what are top performing units able to do in terms of revenue, and what are the lower performing units able to do in terms of revenue. So you're buying in with a franchise, you're buying into a system that exists. There's a playbook, there's marketing, there's branding, there's a whole suite of support services available to you. You'll pay. I mean, you pay ongoing royalties, a percentage of your gross revenues to the franchisor for continued access to those materials, those services, that kind of support. But you have a far greater chance of success with a franchise as a new business than you would with a standalone business, in part because you have that playbook. You have somebody standing behind you who helps you understand how to do this. And then the thing that I love probably most about franchising is you work with a community of owners, other people who have invested like you in the same brand. Those people have the same operational issues, the same operational opportunities that you do every day. I am chatting with Alloy, my personal training brand. I'm chatting with other owners throughout every day of every week and on the weekends. Um, Not because there's something necessarily super critical that needs to be dealt with, but just because we're comparing notes. How did you do this? How did you do that? Did the franchisor corporate give you any resources? By resources, I don't mean money. I mean, did they have some materials that you could use to, say, help with your marketing, things like that? So we're constantly comparing notes. And that again is something that you get with a franchise that you don't get when you start your own business. My daughter owns a standalone gift shop in Alexandria, Virginia. I mean, she can join the Chamber of Commerce and meet other business owners, but there aren't that many gift shops, and she probably knows those owners already, but every one of them is completely unique. So, every business has certain things in common, but the finances that you have, the issues you might have with your landlord, all those things are, really your issue and your issue alone. You don't have anybody to sort of benchmark against.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of franchise family, and that's great because it's network of business owners, and it's a great network which you can just chat with, and you have something in common with them, so you can explore other opportunities. That's what I am also always looking for.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. It's a support network. It's an emotional support network. It's a business support network, and you make friends. I consider all of the owners that I know to be good friends now. So it broadens your network. Which, as I said, I was at the point where I could have retired, and I was wondering, well, what will my social network look like in 5 years if I retire and I mostly sit around the house all day? Versus going into business, taking on new challenges and opportunities and expanding your network that way.
how do you distinguish a good franchise and a bad one? Let's say not so good franchise. Can be the same gyms, of sport franchise, but from what I understand, like franchises are different. One is better than other, and for certain reasons. So you do have you mentioned 250 of brands that you work with, but there are like plenty of brands on the market. How do you choose as a being a new franchisee?
Right. Yeah. FranChoice does a terrific job of screening the brands that we bring in and that we work with. I don't know, I'm just making this number up, but there could be 2,000 different brands out there. And we work with, say, just a
I
little more
even
than
heard
10.
about 8,000 across the
Okay.
country, but yeah,
So you've actually looked that up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we work with a very select subset of all those brands, and we do it based on where they are in their growth cycle. It's there's more opportunity to bring people in. Obviously, if you're a newish brand and you don't have, say you have 50 locations open, but you hope to open up 600. So there are a lot more territories available because everybody typically gets a protected territory that they have, whether it's, say, 30,000 people or 30,000 households, can be quite broad. And that can be in an area of high population density. That may be actually a fairly narrow geographic area, but you have so much opportunity because there are so many potential clients there. So I think we like to work with with brands that are new, but that have a unique concept, a unique twist on an existing concept. And we bring in, I don't know what the average is at the moment, but let's say one new brand 2 or 3 times a month, and maybe one old brand or two brands a month exit the inventory because they've matured to a point where there's really very little um, opportunity to sell more units. Uh, and they, don't need to work with consultants to sell, the remaining five that are available necessarily. Um, because what we're trying to do is we're qualifying a candidate for a franchisor. And anyway, so early in the life cycle of the brand, we work with a lot of those folks as they've been around for a while. Well, obviously, if they've been around for a while, they have a much greater track record. And that gives us an opportunity to say, well, this is how well they do. But again, we're not salespeople, we're franchise consultants. And it's really up to the brand to make the representations about earnings and all the rest of that. And they're regulated. So they have to do it in their franchise disclosure document. But we will look at those too to understand how well somebody might be doing.
What are you looking for in these FDDs, franchise disclosure documents? So they're quite big documents from what I learned. It's like from 2 to 500 pages easily, and majority of it is legal text. So you being a legal person, so it's easy for you to read. But for others, what should you look for in there? What's important in there? Probably everything is important, but what's the most important that you need to watch? And what are the red flags that you would say there could be? Like the document has not been updated for a couple of years or anything.
Sure.
Like
Yeah. So the documents have to be updated yearly. Um, and what I would, if somebody is not working with a franchise consultant and they want to try to figure this out on their own, um, there are two particular items in the FDD. It's item 7 and item 19. And those are the items that tell you the first one tells you what your initial investment parameters are at the low end and at the high end, because there are a lot of variables from market to market. Item 19 tells you what kind of earnings units that are open are able to do. They make their representations there. So those are two critical things. Well, I tend to look outside of the financial disclosure document. When I'm working with a candidate, I want them to, and they will through the process, through the sales process with somebody who actually represents the brand and is paid to sell those units. What kind of a relationship do you have with the salesperson? How good a job are they doing of working you through the process? Because there are steps in every one of these processes where you're learning about this aspect of the business this week and about that aspect of the business next week. Um, are they giving you enough information to help you feel comfortable with the brand? Um, but also, then you typically will have a call with management, with say the CEO of the brand. That's very important. That's who you're going to go into business with. The salespeople, once if you've decided to buy the franchise, you may stay in touch with them, but they're not going to be the people you deal with day to day. The people you deal with is management. It's the CEO. It's the support team. So you want to really understand what kind of support does the franchisor provide? What kind of royalties do they charge? Are they on the low end, say 4%, or on the higher end, 8, 10, or 12%? Some brands charge much higher royalties because they're really giving you a sort of a business in a box. They're giving you something where there isn't a lot of investment on your part up front, or your investment is much lower. Um, Other brands, it's more in the 7% range. What are you getting for those royalties? What is the continuing engagement with the franchisor like? With Alloy, for instance, the corporate team designs the workouts. So the trainers that I hire don't have to every day with every client figure out a new workout. There's a workout of the day that's designed by corporate. The whole system was designed by corporate, and we're there to implement that system with new clients. So I look very much at the support that the franchisor provides you. What are the royalties? What kind of training do you get up front? Are you getting a week or 2 weeks at the headquarters location? Is it all online? And it depends. Some franchises you can learn everything you need to know to operate it by doing online training. Others, you really need to see and feel and experience the training in person. So what is that like? Where is that held? Um, Things like that. You know, really, it comes down to the relationship and the support that the franchisor is going to provide you. For me, most. And do you like them?
do you also try to chat with other franchisees of that franchise? From what I understand, that they also should be listed in the FDD document. And by doing your due diligence, probably could chat with other business owners, or especially with the past ones who no longer who quit for some reason, and ask them why they did that.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And that's a very important part of the process of getting into a franchise. And the salespeople will set you up for what are called validation calls. You're going to talk to, you may do it alone, one on one rather, or you may do it as a group of 3 or 5 candidates who are talking with one owner. I do those calls quarterly for Alloy, where I'm an owner representative and I'm not paid by Alloy to talk with these franchise uh, candidates, potential franchisees. Um, and they can ask me anything. And I am very honest and forthright with them about, every aspect of the business from my perspective, but also then, what is my relationship like after how many years of being a franchisee? How well do I get along with corporate? Do I feel that they're supportive enough? Things like that. So yes, that's an incredibly important part of the process. But initially, for somebody who's just looking at the franchise disclosure document, those 2 items are critical. But then through the process, you want to ask every question and learn every aspect of the business that you can from the salespeople, but then you want to do that also with owners who are actually in business.
Yeah. How about some vendor look-ins and stuff like that? What else should be looked at in the FDD?
Yeah.
Because quite often you are forced to use specific vendors, and that's it.
Yeah. You do want to look at whether or not, and these are really good questions. You do want to look at,
Like homework.
it's obvious, it's good. Um, you do want to look at very closely each of the sections and how it describes what freedom you have as a franchisee and what freedom you don't have. What can the franchisor require you to do? Are there, as you said, specific vendors that you have to use? Well, think about it from the franchisor perspective for just a second. The franchisor wants you to implement a system the way they would. And they, like with Alloy, sorry to keep using that example, but obviously it's relevant because that's the business that I am in.
That's your
The
story.
Yeah, the equipment package. They don't want me just going to Walmart and buying any old equipment, or worse, going on Facebook Marketplace and buying some used equipment and putting that in. So they have a very specific vendor and package of equipment that you have to put in. If you're, say, doing a home service business where you're uh, equipping vans, well, what are the specs? Do they, depending on, there are some brands that really do require specialized vehicles. Well, have, is that something I'm buying from the franchisor? Is that something I'm leasing from the franchisor? Or is that something that I have to, go get General Motors to sell me a specific kind of vehicle that's suitable to this task? Does the franchisor in that case, do they do the branding on the vehicle themselves, or am I paying for that? There's lots of little questions about investment scattered throughout, but the equipment vendor package is an important point. And what kind of latitude do you have, say, for software support, for accounting, or things like that? Can you go off road, do it yourself, hire your own bookkeeper, or are you required to use a particular system? And how much does that system cost? Because it's all disclosed in the franchise disclosure document. And it does give you a range, high investment range, low investment range. Where do you fall in between there? It's worth really sort of looking at your local market and trying to find it in the validation process. All right, which one of these owners are in a market that's sort of equivalent to mine in terms of the density and the availability of real estate, the price of real estate, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely makes sense from standpoint of franchisor because it's there are names that's written on your territory that you opened. After all, so if this example of the gym, if you go and buy cheap equipment, so that there are names that's written there, so it's quite understandable. But quite likely, it's this vendor kind of vendor lock-in. It's different from segment to segment, like. In terms of home services and in terms of gym and in terms of restaurant or whatever, it's quite likely different. The approaches are different there. So somewhere there is lock-in, somewhere there is no. So probably like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the as you said, the industry segment that you're working in can make a lot of difference. There are some things where, um, say it's a home cleaning service. Well, the franchisee is incentivized to use the cheapest materials available for cleaning a home. The franchisor wants the brand to represent itself as a premium brand that uses only certain kinds of cleaning materials, and something like that. You know, what kind of latitude do you have? But also, if you're not going to use, and this is, I think, every franchisor's fear, if you're not going to use what they recommend, and it has a negative impact on a client experience, and that client then starts talking about it, the brand could be tarnished because of one franchisee's use of substandard equipment or materials.
Yeah, I
So,
see
and
that.
something I didn't mention, it is a two-way street between franchisees and franchisors, or between prospective franchisees and franchisors. The process is very much mutual elimination. Franchisors only want to work with people that they want to be in businesses with as well, and people who they believe will maintain the standards of the brand.
Yeah, I see. Uh, to wrap up around FDD, can I just take the FDD document that I got from the franchisor, put it into ChatGPT, and tell it like, tell me everything about like what I should be looking for? Uh, why is there a room and in business for consultants, basically in this current age of AI? What do consultants provide as an extra service that ChatGPT cannot do? With
Yeah.
FDD doc. Sorry for direct questions.
No, no, no. I think it's a wonderful question, actually, because I believe in the service that we provide, even though it's free to the candidate. On the other end of the process, if a candidate does buy a franchise, the franchisor pays us a fee. Um, so what is the franchisor paying for? They're paying for us bringing quality candidates to them who have already been screened and know what to expect in the process when they meet with a franchisor. And what do we bring to the process for a prospective franchisee? Well, it's knowledge of the industry, knowledge of the kind of relationships you have, um, knowledge of the different types of services, categories of services, industries. What's hot? What was hot 5 years ago? I'm not trying to sell what's hot, but people ask, what's the hot new franchise? Well, I can tell you what I think, but honestly, what I'm trying to do is it's essentially sort of an executive recruiting or a matchmaking service that I provide. I'm trying to match a candidate. First, I'm going to understand who they are, what kind of resources they have, what kind of tolerances they have for risk, things like that. That I don't think Chat GPT can necessarily determine based on a few cryptic inputs. But even somebody who can put a lot into it is still, Chat GPT is going to give you an answer back based on what you've given it. What I can provide is the experience of understanding the industry. I work with, as I said, we work with more than 250 brands. I think it could take a long time. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. For somebody to actually screen 250 brands using Chat GPT. Whereas I'm looking at those brands all day, every day, and trying to match people with them. And over time, and not that much time, you develop an instinct and an understanding of what are the attributes of this business that might appeal to this kind of person versus that business that might appeal to a different person. So
If
it's
a
match.
yeah, if a person comes to you and says, "I want to open a gym in this location," like let's use gym, let's continue using gym, for example, and out of these 250, you have about 20 gym networks. Which one do you suggest? Do you recommend? Do you provide some kind of like side by side comparison or whatever? How,
Yeah, it's another great question. When I'm presenting brands to a candidate after getting to know them, doing a consultation, having them fill out a lengthy questionnaire, um, I don't bring them 10 different fitness brands. I bring them three, and they're going to have different characteristics. Obviously, they're all gyms, but they're going to have different characteristics in terms of the investment amount, in terms of what an owner's experience will be in this brand. Is it something where, for instance, something as simple but as critical as, is the owner going to be the operator of the facility, or is the owner more an investor? What is their involvement with the brand going to be like? And which of these brands is better for one of those than for the other? Um, you know, any owner of a franchise can also be the operator, but not every owner of a franchise should be the operator. It may be a lot better. For instance, me, lawyer, lobbyist, now a gym owner. What am I going to do trying to train? I have no role, no utility as a trainer, but I have hired people throughout my entire business career, and I have a sense of what to look for. But there's also, again, this is something that the franchisors should provide. Many of them, most of them, certainly I think all the brands we work with do provide you resources, at least in terms of guidance, for what kind of people to look for to staff your location or your service. And, I have to hire skilled, certified, qualified, experienced trainers for my gym locations. And I went through an extensive process with each of my full-time hires. Ultimately, they've been in place a long time. They do hiring of part-time trainers, things like that. And I don't really get involved in that other than to, sort of backstop them, to give them my opinion based on their feedback about a, particular trainer. So I hope that answered your question.
yeah, kind of.
Kind
Uh,
of.
there is also always different angles. Yeah, but yeah, yes, thank you. It's good, great answer. With regards to being a consultant or broker, uh, how long does it, like the lifetime of a client? How long does it take from moment they come until the moment they buy a franchise, they become a franchisee? And what's maybe the most labor intensive part of this of your business there?
Sure. So the time frame, I talk to potential candidates every day. I don't engage them in the full process with me unless they're at a position where they say, you know what, I want to be in business in 3 months or in 6 months. I'm ready to go through the decision-making process right now. Those are the people that I work with because they're ready to do something. I'm not going to waste their time, my time, or a franchisor's time with somebody who's just sort of kicking the tires on the idea of owning a business. I want people who are ready to do something, or at least ready to seriously consider this. If they're in that position, and I tell people all the time, you know how to find me. If you're not ready today, but you're going to be ready in 4 months, call me. if you're going to be ready, think in a year, like, well, I don't really want to do anything until I retire or until I leave this job, and I'm not going to leave it for another year and a half. Call me then. But for somebody who's ready to go through the process, it can take 4 weeks at the shortest, but typically 8 to 10 weeks, simply because you're going through a very deliberate process first with me, and the initial process with me takes, say, 10 days, because we're going to have several calls. We're going to have a 2-hour consultation. You're going to fill out a questionnaire. I'm going to go through all of the brands, and I'm going to do a write-up on the three that I'm going to recommend for your initial engagement. So that's pretty intensive for the first 10 days. But after that, the candidate then is going through a weekly call with the sales team for the franchise. And at a certain point, they will begin also doing validation calls with current owners. Um, and at the end of that process, there's sort of a decision point, and decision day or confirmation day is the day that you meet with the prospective franchisee, meets with the team at the franchisor, and decides, is this the day? Am I going to do this? Are we going to sign? But you're also then, really getting to do your final check on, are these people that I want to be in business with? So like I said, it can take 8 to 10 weeks at the outside to go through this process. Short end, 4 to 6 weeks, probably.
Yeah. So
And
Thomas
then
is
there's,
yeah. Sorry.
no, that's all right. Then there's also the last part of it is, okay, you've decided to buy into a franchise, you've signed. Well, what kind of franchise is it? Is it, if it's a mobile services business, or, a business where you don't need brick and mortar, you can be up and running in a month or 6 weeks. But if it's construction involved, if it's a physical location, well, then you have to do the real estate search, and you have to negotiate a lease, and then you have to get your permits and build. So it can be 6 months or 18 months, even, much different
I-
if you're doing brick and mortar.
Is somebody guiding franchisee at that point? From what I understand, they already signed the agreement. They paid the initial fee, and then they're into construction. So, is there any kind of guidance during that period for a franchisee, or
Yes.
is it provided by franchisor?
It's provided either by the franchisor or by a franchise service organization, an FSO. There are lots of those. Well, let's say there's a handful anyway, that work with brands that are going into franchising and need, more hands, more experienced people to really get this thing up and running as a franchise operation. And typically, real estate search, there are services provided for that, connections. There's a lot of guidance from the franchisor about location search. Um, and they're using, sophisticated software to try and understand the dynamics of the population in that marketplace. Are they, for Alloy, our target demographic is people between, say, the ages of 45 and 70. How many of those people are there in that geographic area, within say, a 15-minute drive of the location that you're looking at? So all of those, there's a lot of support, a lot of data, a lot of analysis that goes into that site selection.
That was also one of my questions. How did it decide where the two locations that you owned, where they will be? And probably it really depends how on the proximity for people to come over, or it's in certain cases, do they live nearby, so can they come like by feet there? So how did you choose? How did you decide, and who helped you on that
Yeah.
way?
So I worked with a team that was
Yeah.
that provides services to the franchisor, and you pay them a separate fee, and they work through the process with you on trying to find available locations. the first screen on that is, where do I live? Where do I want to work? If I don't want to work more than 30 minutes from where I live, well, that's sort of your big
Okay.
radius.
It starts
Um,
from you. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Now,
obvious.
but maybe you're fine being fully remote from a physical location. There are people, even in our system, who live in, say, Raleigh, North Carolina, but have studios, Alloy personal training studios, somewhere in Utah. It's a different proposition. It takes a different kind of skill set to be able to do that successfully. But most people want to be within a certain proximity of where they live. So that's your initial screen. And then there are only so many locations, say retail strip centers, strip malls, or standalone buildings. And then is there enough square footage at any of those? Is there space for lease? Is it the right square footage? Um, and then you will look back, of course, you're always going forward and backward in this process. All right, let's go back and look at the analytics within a certain radius of that location. Do we have enough potential clients who meet our general demographics? So you're constantly you're overlaying one thing on top of another. Lot of considerations, and some of it, if you're in a local market and you've lived there a long time, you have a sense of, say, shopping patterns, traffic patterns. So you'll apply your own personal knowledge as an overlay onto that process.
Yeah, where do people meet? Where do they socialize? Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense. Awesome. Coming back to you as a consultant, so what's the most labor intensive part of what you're doing? And if there was some kind of software that could help you in that process, what would it be? If you could automate something, what would it be?
another great question. So there are sort of two broad labor parts to what I do. One of them is all of the soft stuff. It's meeting with the candidate, meeting with their spouse, getting to know them, going through the whole questionnaire process and the consultation. That's one set of effort, or one type of effort. The other type of effort, of course, is going through all the brands, because it's not just what is suitable, but say I narrow it down. I'm like, okay, I think these 10 brands could be, any one of them might be a good match. Well, is there territory available where these people want to be? If there's not, well, you cross them off right away. If there is, then so you narrow it down from 10 to 5. And then if all 5 of those have territory available, all right, I'm going to go through very carefully each aspect of their business and match it against what I have learned from the candidate. So that's an enormously labor intensive activity. It can take days. And then I do a write up of each of the brands and how that brand and its characteristics match with the candidate's characteristics. So I have, of course, been wondering for quite some time now, is there a way to use AI or automate any part of this? Is there potentially a software platform where I can feed in data and it has not just the data I'm feeding in about the candidate, but then also about these franchises that might be able to pinpoint the suitability a little better? But honestly, at the end of the day, I'm presenting brands to somebody that may be absolutely perfect for them in terms of what they want and what the brand does, and they don't like the name of it. And then, you know, yeah, they can't see putting that name on a business card and handing it to, their best friend. Yeah.
and and that is life. So that's how it works.
And I don't know that
You should
AI software can really change any of that.
No, it can, but it can save you this couple of days that you spent comparing the different brands and especially matching them against the potential franchisee.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah,
I
and it
I love what I do. It's so much fun working with people and trying to understand them. And everybody's different, but over time you see similarities and patterns and things. It's very it's good work. I like doing it.
and how do you like? How do you know if certain franchise has territory available at that location? Is it in the document, or is it somewhere in your internal databases of franchise?
Yeah, we are constantly talking to all of the brands in our inventory, and we're updating our. We have a data sheet, um, and we're constantly updating that. But at the same time, they're constantly in conversations with people, so you have to do a real time check with somebody at. There's someone at every brand who is responsible for maintaining an up to the minute, up to date list of locations that have been sold and locations that are available. And then there's one final overlay I'll mention, and that is every year, franchisee or franchisors in certain states have to re-register. And while they're re-registering, they have to submit a draft FDD to the state regulators. And during the period that's under review, they can't sell. So there may be territory available for a candidate, and yet the franchisor, they're limited right now, and they don't know for how long before they can sell again. And that's the one that's probably the most frustrating. You've got somebody who's great match, you got a good brand, and you can't bring them together. Yeah.
I see. Oh, but actually, yeah, you're doing a great job with this matchmaking because it feels human, you know. So you try to understand what they want. Well, as you mentioned, you meet the franchisees, you meet their spouse, and so on and so forth. So it's really there's really human touch because I've checked online all this available like Gator and all other platforms, and being a potential franchisee, you feel yourself a product of a funnel. You are not like you're not a client, you're a product, you know, and you feel being used. And while this is a market of a franchisee, not a franchisor, it's still a market of franchisees. So everybody is actively franchisors are actively seeking to find franchisees, and having a market of franchisee and having franchisee being a product is weird for me. And because
It's true.
and what you do, you have turned it the other way around. So you do provide a human service to them, and that's something that yeah yeah
You're
please.
very insightful. You're very insightful about this. Obviously there are ways in which technology and AI could assist on the one hand, and on the other hand, you recognize it's it is a matchmaking process. There is the human element. Somebody could be a very good operator and just not love the brand that they're with, and they're not incentive. It disincentivizes their active participation. Other people can be, terrible operators, but with a good brand that has good support, and they might be very successful. Um, but at the end of the day, do they really like what they're doing? If they're not that great at doing it, so we're always looking for those sorts of intangibles as well, and I think that's where, the real service comes in. It's in all the intangibles.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Russ, for a great discussion. I'm kind of out of questions. Yeah. Before we wrap it up, is there anything you would like to add on top of what we discussed?
Yeah. Thank you. Um, the world of franchising is vast. There are thousands upon thousands of different opportunities. It doesn't cost a candidate anything to work with somebody like me. There's an upfront fee that they will pay to the franchisor, and that amount is fixed. They'll pay it whether they work with me or they find it on their own on the internet and somehow make a connection. But I think their odds of making the right connection are increased by working with somebody who can help them with all the intangibles, but then also guide them through the tangible parts of the process. So that sounds like a self-serving pitch, but um, in all honesty, I don't know that I'd be where I am if I hadn't worked with a consultant, because I would have had no idea where to start. And this was sort of, I was doing it pre-AI days, and maybe somebody can do this all on their own using AI, but they're still going to um, the piece that they'll lack in that sort of exchange is the intangible guidance and feel that somebody like me can provide.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. From what I learned, that's for sure. Awesome. Thanks a lot for great discussion.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Oleksij.
Yeah, and thanks for joining.